Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this webinar, Creating a Culture of Teamwork using the 5 Behaviours Personal Development Profile. Okay, so I'm going to dive straight into it because I don't need to explain what it is, because that's going to be part of what we'll be covering. So let's start with our agenda and the 5 behaviours model. I'm sure that you are all familiar with that. It's the most widely known and used model for team effectiveness, but we'll just do a quick overview of that. And some of the challenges that organizations are facing today in terms of creating a healthy team environment and having people actually operating effectively as teams, because the situation has changed somewhat in the last few years. The solution that we're going to present is individual skill development, as opposed to team building workshops with intact teams, right? And that's the purpose of the 5 Behaviours Personal Development Profile. So overview of the 5 behaviours, the personal development profile. That's the 5 Behaviours Personal Development Profile. Okay, and so what is it? And I'm going to take you through that and how it works, and how using it can actually help organizations create a culture of teamwork across the whole organization. Okay, so the rise of teams, network of teams is an organizational priority, top organizational priority according to Deloitte. And what some researchers found is that 30% of a person's day is spent in a team setting, and 50% of the work done is in team situations. So that's a lot. Okay. You should be familiar with this book, and if you're not, there's a picture of it. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. It's just had its 20th birthday since it was published just recently. So it's been around a long time, and yet it is still the best-selling Patrick Lencioni book. And he's got about 12 or 13 books. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are over 3 million copies of this book sold worldwide. And that's, in business book terms, that's right up there. There aren't too many business books, maybe good to great. It would be one that maybe surpassed that, but there's very few that get over 1 million, let alone up to 3 million. Okay, so so the model that is in the book that Patrick wrote about, and this is the model that he came up with. I'm going to start with the 5 dysfunctions, and I know we're going to be talking about the 5 behaviours, but I think it helps to understand the 5 dysfunctions to really understand the model. All right, so it starts off with an absence of trust. When there's an absence of trust in teams, people don't want to talk to each other. All right, and there's also a fear of conflict, and especially when there's an absence of vulnerability-based trust. All right, which is what we're going to be talking about. So when there's a fear of conflict, people are afraid of speaking up. People are afraid of disagreeing. One of the best stories I've heard about the whole idea of disagreeing is the IT company Intel. You've probably had computers or laptops with a little badge on them saying Intel inside. They're not doing that anymore, but Intel is still one of the biggest IT companies in the world. And they have a policy that they have expectations of all employees that when they go to a meeting, they're expected to disagree. Disagree as much as you like during the meeting. However, when you leave the meeting, you commit to the decisions that have been made. So they just call it disagree and commit. And that's why we get a lack of commitment when there's no disagreement, right? Because people haven't spoken up. And so when there's a lack of commitment to decisions that are made or to actions that are agreed on, we get an avoidance of accountability. People don't follow through and avoid accepting responsibility for not following through. And then, of course, that leads to an inattention to results. Okay, so that turned that around, and what we have is the 5 behaviors. All right, so first of all, instead of an absence of trust, we want team members who trust each other. All right, and particularly vulnerability-based trust, where people are willing to admit that they need help, or willing to admit that they don't know how to do something. All right, and then that leads to engaging in conflict around ideas or issues. All right, so we talk about it being productive conflict or healthy conflict, where team members can engage in unfiltered, constructive debate of ideas. Okay, and we have to have the trust to be able to do that. That then leads to better commitment to decisions, right? Because people have spoken up and they've discussed it and they've disagreed and they suggested this or suggested that. We've got all the ideas on the table. Then we can commit to better decisions because all the ideas are out there. And if once team members have committed to decisions and actions, it makes sense that they would hold one another accountable. So accountability in this model is peer-to-peer accountability. Yes, the boss needs to hold people accountable too, but Patrick talks about the willingness irony. The irony is that when the boss is willing to hold people accountable, other team members will be willing to hold each other accountable as well. Okay, but if the boss isn't willing to do it, of course, no one else is going to. All right. So obviously, when there's high trust, we're engaged in conflict, we've made the best decisions, and we're holding each other accountable to following through on those decisions, everybody's going to be focused on the achievement of collective results. Okay, so that's the model. So it's not just a team building model or a team effectiveness model. It's actually a way of operating. All right, and it's also a way of diagnosing what's going on in a team. For example, someone's not following through on decisions that they've made. Right, or they've agreed to, right? So they're not being accountable. Okay, well, if they're not being accountable, where was the commitment? So we can go back to the commitment level to say, well, did you really commit to doing this? And well, yeah, I sort of nodded my head and I sort of agreed, but I didn't really agree. I didn't really believe it. Okay, so why didn't we agree? Because we haven't had sufficient conflict. Right, so we go back to the previous level, and if we are unwilling to engage in that conflict, we're going to go back to the trust level and establish trust level that will allow people to engage in that conflict. Okay, so it's a really good diagnostic tool as to what's going on in teams as well. Okay, all right, so what are your top challenges with team training? Wiley asked thousands of people, what did they come up with? The first challenge was the program length. Right, because team building, we used to ask for 2 or 3 days away, right, to do some team building, and it's very difficult to get that now. All right. The other challenge is that most employees are on more than one team. Okay, and so there's a need for team training to be individual based, and so that those skills can be transferable from one team to another, and so that's what the 5 Behaviours Personal Development Program is. You can have 30 or 40 people in a room if you're doing a room, or on a virtual training session, because you can do this virtually or face-to-face. All right, all learning to operate by the 5 behaviours model to be a better teammate, even though they are not a team in themselves. Okay, and so so the 5 Behaviours Personal Development is half a day. Recommend at least 4 hours. I wouldn't try to cut it down much more than that, because there's a lot in it, and it's really recommended that you do all of the activities to get the best out of this. All right, and because you're doing it with a bunch of individuals, the program's designed in the facilitator guide, and the curriculum around it is designed around people not having a lot of discussion with other people in the room about them as a team, because they're not a team. All right. However, I have run this with the Integro team, and we were a team. And of course, we were testing this out when we first got it 3 or 4 years ago. And what I found was, because it's a personal development program, and the interpretation in the reports are very personal, right? We actually reached a higher level of vulnerability in discussions within the team than we did with the team version. All right, and so if you're going to do it with an intact team, I would think more than 4 hours, maybe even 6 hours, or maybe 2 sessions of 3 hours or something like that. Okay, all right, then So the idea is that we're developing skills in the individual that they can then take with them to every team meeting. So if they, no matter which team they're going to, whether it's a project team or a cross-functional team or their functional team, when they turn up in the meeting, they know that everybody else in the meeting understands the importance of being vulnerable and speaking up and disagreeing and so on. Okay, and so we get all the teams that are functioning in the organization operating more effectively. Okay, so then of course we create a culture of teamwork. Okay, so let's have a look at the 5 behaviors personal development profile. Now, before I get into that, let me clarify that for a person to get this profile, they have to be sent a link from your Epic account to do the 5 behaviors personal development profile. But the questionnaire that they're actually doing is the Everything DISC Adaptive Testing Assessment, the same assessment you would be doing if you're doing the workplace profile or any other DISC profile for that matter. Okay, so is it a DISC profile? Well, in 5 behaviors clothing, yes. Okay, and so it does, the only place it mentions DISC is in the introduction inside the front cover, where it says that this profile is based on the Everything DISC assessment. All right, we're based on Everything DISC. There's no mention of DISC anywhere. The person doesn't see what their DISC profile is. And as we're going through, I'm using the sample report here from a young lady called Sabina. I'm assuming she was a young lady, but and you'll get a sense of what style she is by the way the profile has been interpreted. So the person's style is being used to provide personalized interpretation as they go through. So let's have a look at that. So page 3 in the profile, we see an overview of the 5 behaviors as the person who's got this profile is likely to operate. Okay, so let's zoom in on trust, for example. Okay, so given the value you place on both developing relationships and expressing yourself, you may be naturally inclined to open up to teammates with your honest ideas and feelings. So, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously. You can, this can help create an environment where vulnerability-based trust can flourish because of your openness. So I suspect, and I'm sure you've already guessed too, that this person, Sabina, is an I style. All right, or an I something style, maybe ISID, whatever, but obviously has some I. Okay, so what it's saying is because of your style, you're likely to encourage a lot of vulnerability-based trust. And of course, the I style is naturally very open. All right, another example from here, accountability. Holding teammates accountable may be difficult for you if you fear it could damage your relationships. Okay, now, as you can imagine, the wording, the interpretation in the profile is going to be significantly different for someone else who's a C style, all right, or a CD style, okay, than obviously what we're getting here with the I style. So each person is getting their own individualized interpretation. Now, this page is designed to just give people a look at the 5 behaviors through a lens that's helping them to see how they may tend to react in each of these 5 behaviors. Okay, then we dive into the trust module. All right, and there's a module on each of the 5. It's not actually a module per se in terms of facilitation, but I usually refer to them as modules because that's what we do in the team version, isn't it? Okay, so Sabina, given the value you place on relationships, you may find it easiest to build trust in a warm, collaborative environment. Okay, where people are lively and expressive. Again, this is all really positive news, but someone else may be finding that it's not easy for them to build vulnerability-based trust. It's a hard word to say, isn't it? Okay. And so on the right-hand side, we see these are some items that are typical, similar to the items we use to measure vulnerability-based trust in the team version. Okay. So there's some examples of what vulnerability would look like. And then the next page says, why may you hold back from being vulnerable? And then these things are personalized as well. Different styles will have different items there to look at and to identify, well, what's holding me back from being more vulnerable? All right. And And then that's going to take them into the action planning. Okay. So in each of the 5 behaviors in this profile, there's some activities, there's some discussion, and then there's the action planning page. All right, so here we have 3 action plan possibilities, and participants are asked to identify one that they think makes most sense for them. Yes, I really could benefit from doing more of this. All right. And then down the bottom of the page, it says, put it into practice. Use this space to describe ways you can apply your chosen habits on your teams. No, teams, plural. Okay. And what benefits could this bring in those teams? Okay. All right. So that's vulnerability-based trust, which leads us into conflict. And what I really like what they've done here in this profile is made the connection from trust to conflict, from each behavior to the next behavior. All right. So there's a quote in the middle here: when there's trust, conflict becomes nothing but the pursuit of truth, an attempt to find the best possible answer. All right, by getting people to speak up. Okay, so how does it impact you, Sabina? All right, and again, personalized text here for Sabina. All right, so again, it reminds her about her openness. Your tendency to be open, you're more likely to contribute to the sort of unfiltered opinions that are critical to constructive debate of ideas, even though conflict could be a challenge for her because her focus on relationships. Okay, so and in fact, on the smaller text underneath there, you can see it says sharing your honest opinions without fear that it will damage relationships could make you more likely to confront and discuss sensitive issues that may be holding the team back. So, all right, so that's the introduction to conflict, and then in conflict, what do you actually contribute? Again, her tendency to be open and expressive can help to get people discussing things. And connecting with people and talking things out. And then what does she find stressful about conflict? And so for each person, they're seeing what the positives are and how I can contribute to more open, vibrant discussion, and what am I likely to find stressful about conflict. Okay, so we've got some really interesting activities that we do in this exercise, and this is designed originally for classroom version. All right, but there are 2 continua in the conflict section. Are you a spirited debater or a calm debater? And your dot will be placed on that scale. So Sabina is slightly more calm than spirited. And then are you receptive, stays open to ideas, or steadfast, holds firm to your own opinions? And Sabina is more receptive to other people's ideas. Now, in a classroom situation, we're starting to move back to that. We're getting a lot more requests for classroom training now. And I'm even doing one for about 30 people next week. So that'll be fun for a change after doing so many virtual ones. And to do this with a classroom, you would actually get the people, the participants, to line up across the room with spirited debater on one side of the room and calm debater on the other side of the room, and line up where your dot sits in between those 2 walls, right? And then we start with some questions. Let's start with the calm debater, half of the continuum. If you disagree with someone's ideas, how do you let them know if you're a calm debater? All right. And how do you typically feel when conflict gets tense? Okay. So as you can imagine, calm debaters are going to go about pretty calmly and not wanting to upset anybody. And when things get tense, they're likely to slow down or even be quiet. What about the spirited debaters? So now we go to the spirited debaters at the other end of the room and say, how do you tend to, if you disagree with someone's ideas, how do you let them know? And I've been in a session where we did this, and we had, I think, about 30 people, And the end of the room where the spirited debaters were, you should have heard the noise when they were discussing how they disagree, or how do you let people know when you disagree, okay? Compared to the calm debaters who are talking very quietly amongst each other, okay? And it's really useful because the thing we want here is the self-awareness for people to know that if I am a spirited debater, I might escalate conflict a bit if I get too spirited about it. All right, and then understanding the other people that I'm working with in the teams that I work with who are calm debaters, and why they're not getting as excited about or animated about the discussions that we're having. Okay, so there's also a similar activity, I won't go into that, but for highlighting and again creating self-awareness around whether I'm receptive or whether I tend to hold fast to my own opinions, being steadfast. Okay, and how does that look? How does that come across when I'm dealing with other team members? Okay, all right, so that leads us on to commitment, which is the third behavior. People will not actively commit to a decision if they have not had the opportunity to voice their opinions, ask questions, and understand the rationale behind it. All right. As Pat Lencioni calls it, people will not buy in to a decision if they haven't weighed into it. Right. If they hadn't spoken up and had their opinion expressed about it. Okay. So in the commitment section, there are two parts to commitment. Obviously, there's clarity. You can't commit to something you're not clear about. All right. And that's an important point for team members to understand when you're going into discussions. If you're not clear about something, you need to say so. All right. Because you can't commit to anything unless you're clear on it. And so sometimes people are afraid to ask questions. And so you and clarity again is looking at Sabina's style and how her style might affect her seeking clarity about the decisions that are being made. And then the second part of commitment is buy-in. All right. So now that I'm clear on what's being decided and what's going to be done, do I buy into that? All right. And we really can't move forward until the team buys into it. And the thinking behind this, Pat Lencioni says that consensus is a dirty word. That's not my understanding of what I saw consensus as, but I understand what he's saying is consensus, in his opinion, is when everybody has to agree with the decision. Everybody needs to buy into the decision so that the team can move forward with that decision. All right, and so he's making a distinction there. So you might not necessarily agree with the decisions being made, but you need to buy into moving forward with the decision the team's gone with. Okay, so then connecting commitment and accountability. Commitment gives team members the courage to hold one another accountable, knowing that they're asking their peers to live up to something they've already fully agreed to do. All right. So if you've got buy-in, people have agreed, right, to do something. Okay. So why wouldn't they expect to be held accountable? And not necessarily by the boss, but by their peers, because the boss may not see what's going on, right? Peers working together may become aware that one of the team members isn't following through and doing something they agreed to do. Well, it would make sense for that peer to hold that person accountable in the moment. All right, didn't we agree about that? I've actually got a little video, and that reminds me, before I go any further, I need to share my sound before we get to that video because it's coming up shortly. There's a series of videos. This program, the facilitator kit, actually has Patrick Lencioni introducing each of the 5 behaviors as well. But they've created little videos to illustrate accountability and what it looks like for a peer to hold another peer accountable. Okay, so we'll come to that shortly. Okay, in fact, very shortly, like about now. Okay. All right. Holding teammates accountable. This is the behavior that most team members find most difficult. And in the 5 behaviours team development version, it's the behaviour that teams score lowest in the majority of cases, all right? And so Wiley created these videos to illustrate that. It shows a team of 3 having a discussion and committing to a decision, and that's the video I'm going to show you. In the interest of time, although it looks like we could have more time available, that they overhear a teammate not following through on the decision that was being made. Okay, so here are the 3 teammates: Joetta, Sunmi, and James. And hopefully we have sufficient bandwidth for you to be able to see the video clearly. In most cases, it seems to work pretty well for us. Okay, so here's the initial conversation.
Okay, I got an update from IT, and obviously the software rollout is still a few months away, but it sounds like they're gonna let users build their own avatars.
Clients will love that.
Yeah, they will. But is this for sure gonna happen?
It sounds like they're gonna push for it, but no, I don't think it's for sure yet. So probably shouldn't tell clients, right?
Yeah, let's keep this quiet until it's finalized.
That works for me.
Okay, well, that's all I've got.
I got nothing.
Actually, James, when do you think you'll be done with the client survey?
I need like a week, so
But it'll be done before the quarterly meeting, right?
yeah, definitely.
Okay, because I'll need about a week to create the support materials. Does that give you enough time, though?
Yeah, I think so. How's next Friday sound?
That's perfect. Because then as soon as I get it, I'll throw those slides together for the meeting.
Okay, awesome.
Great.
Okay, so what commitments did they make to each other there? And the first one was that the discussion about the avatars, all right, and how exciting that potentially was that their customers would be able to create their own avatar. But they did agree that since it wasn't certain that it was going to happen, that they would not tell anyone about it just yet. Okay. The second agreement was James committing to get some data to Joetta by the end of the week. And so the next video shows Sunmi talking to a client, all right, Dave. And she gets all excited and starts telling Dave about the possible avatars, all right, even though they all agreed that they wouldn't tell anyone. And Joetta happens to come along and overhear Sunmi talking about it, all right. And so you see Joetta, the video shows her thinking out loud. Oh, we agreed not to do that, you know, and it's not my job to talk to her. I'm not her boss, but I've got to say something. So eventually, she goes in and talks to Sunmi, and they agree to have another meeting to discuss it and so on. Okay. There's a third video which then see Sunmi and James having a conversation, and James doesn't think it's all that urgent that he gets this stuff to Joetta by the end of the week, and so then Sunmi challenges him on that and holds him accountable to getting it to her and so on. Okay. What I like about it, one of the reasons I wanted to let you know that this is in the kit, is that this is the most difficult behavior for team members to learn to become more effective at, holding each other accountable. All right. And the way they do it in these videos makes it look actually doable. Right. It's not confrontational in a negative sense. Yes, it's confrontational. Sunmi, can I talk to you about that? But it's very constructively done, and it's the way of helping people learn how to hold peers accountable, which is obviously the main part of this module and this particular behavior. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint slide I had up a moment ago. Wiley created an excellent series of videos, and the last video, the next one, I've already described it to you. So an excellent example of how to do it respectfully. Okay. All right. So connecting accountability to results, and again, Sabina's personalized interpretation, and she has a natural tendency to be upbeat and encouraging. But obviously being an I style and the need for recognition for people to be positive about her, she may struggle a little bit with accountability, right? And then focusing on results. In the results section here, the main part of this is, what are your motivators? What are your primary motivators in working on a team? And for Sabina, it's working closely with colleagues, giving and receiving praise, initiating projects, and inspiring others, right? They're the things that would really motivate Sabina. And the things that would stress her would be having to focus on routine tasks, being forced to work on a steady project for a long time, being in a dull or unsocial environment, and being forced to slow your pace. Okay, so what we do in the profile here is we dive into those motivators in more depth. Okay, so let's look at those and how you can use these motivators from the previous page to help your teams work towards shared goals. All right, so how can you take advantage of your ability to work closely with your colleagues, giving and receiving praise, etc. Okay, so there's an activity around that. Okay, which then takes us into the summary in the profile. All right, and the summary, it's the actual action planning part of this is really excellent. Okay, so we can see a summary of the 5 behaviors here and what Sabina might excel in, right, and what she might struggle with. And so she's then asked to choose one of the 5 behaviors that she would like to work on more. And in the profile itself, it has this action planning section. Okay, so given what you've learned today, choose a behavior to focus on first. So which of the 5 behaviors you're going to focus on, and then turn to the how-to page for that behavior. This is the action planning in each of the 5 behaviors. So their page numbers are there, and they've got notes that they've taken on how what they're going to put into action to improve in that behavior, and then use those notes from that particular behavior that they've chosen now, and how they're going to apply that. So, and what will you do to adopt the habit of being more vulnerable or engaging in more productive conflict? And what are you going to do tomorrow? What are you going to do in the next 2 weeks? And what are you going to do in the next month? Okay. All right. Now, as a skilled facilitator, obviously you would have some way of getting people to share feedback and discuss this with each other. And of course, if it's an intact team that you're doing this with, it would be even more meaningful to share that information, and maybe even have some accountability partners. And so we're going to hold each other accountable for following through and doing this and checking in with each other. Okay. All right. So the 5 behaviors personal development profile is personalized and relevant interpretation for each person, and it's based on their DISC style. Okay. It helps them to become a better teammate. It gives them permission to adapt, to be more effective, and it focuses on individual skill building, right? And of course, it's based on everything DISC. Okay. Now, I should add here that even though it's based on everything DISC and the DISC assessment, you cannot use existing data from another DISC profile to create this profile. So even if someone has done a DISC profile, they would have to take the questionnaire again, but they'd be going in to do the personal development profile, so they may not even be aware that it's a DISC profile assessment. All right. Now, the reason for that is if you were able to use existing data and someone had done a workplace profile, and then you use their existing data from the workplace profile to create 5 behaviors personal development, the person's going to get this profile with all this personalized information about them, but they didn't fill anything out to get it. All right. And it could be months since they had done the other DISC profile. All right. So to avoid that situation, people saying, where did this information come from? You have to get people to take the assessment for this. Okay. There's only one exception to that, and is if the person has done the 5 behaviors team development profile with an intact team, they can use the existing data from the 5 behaviours team assessment to create this personal development profile. Okay, all right. So there's a comprehensive facilitator kit with videos. Showed you one little video. All right. The facilitator guide is very comprehensive, and there's additional activities in there to help you. The facilitator kit also can be used for the virtual session, but this would be much more effective if you could do it face to face, but it certainly can be done virtually. There's embedded videos, and I mentioned that the Patrick Lencioni videos, him describing each of the 5 behaviours, as well as the videos around accountability and how to use that behaviour more effectively. It's all on a USB drive. There's also support materials. The kit is $1,600 plus GST. Okay, and of course you can use that with as many teams as you want, many people as you want. All right. So what's next? Create a culture of teamwork. Does it make sense, all right, to have everybody in the organization know how to be a team member? All right, and this is a really great model for them to know how to be a team member with. All right, everybody knows that we've got to build trust. We've got to engage in healthy conflict. I've got to speak up and disagree if I don't agree. Commit, hold each other accountable. Focus on collective results, not just my own results. Okay, so that's the skills all employees can develop using the 5 behaviours model. Okay, so it reinforces the whole value of 5 behaviours. Obviously, there's still a place for the 5 behaviours team version for intact teams, and having them work together over a longer period of time. But you can certainly have everyone in the organisation operating by this model. Okay. There's also the 5 behaviours facilitator accreditation. Okay, that's designed primarily around the team version, and it's a virtual accreditation. It's 5 90-minute webinars over 5 weeks. We've been running that for 6 years now. We have probably around 200 or 200 plus people who are accredited 5 behaviours facilitators. And if you're interested in that, contact the team. There's one coming up in July. I think we've got about 7 or 8 people on that already. So we're actually getting more and more people interested in the 5 behaviours model all the time now. Okay. So developing the facilitation skills and gaining confidence and expertise in the model is what the accreditation is about. Okay. And then practice customizing a program to meet unique needs of teams. And as I said, 5 weeks blended learning course. Okay. So the 5 behaviours model helps team members take and internalize ownership and gives them a common language and process to talk about issues. Okay. Surfaces issues, builds trust, and here are our contact details. Okay. Well, just in wrapping up, just to remind you, the whole purpose of this 5 behaviours personal development profile is to create an opportunity for people who work on teams to learn the skills of being a better teammate, no matter what team I'm working on today. All right. And so we know that there's a lot more people working on more than one team in these last few years in particular. And these team member skills of being vulnerable, engaging in healthy conflict, etc., can be used just as effectively, more difficult, but just as effective in a virtual environment. All right. So if you're still having a lot of meetings on Teams, then you can still engage in healthy conflict. You can still speak up and get your opinion across. You can ask questions to clarify, to make sure that you are clear on what's being decided, etc. So the skills go with you no matter where you are. Well, thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure to share this information with you. And again, if you have any questions at all about the profile, about implementing it, the facilitator kit, just get in contact with us and I'd be happy to get on a call with you.